Morning all. All right, so we're starting off today with a stats video. This was something I came up with last night. I thought, yeah, I can do this. Talking about stats that we don't normally get into on the channel. And we can have the discussion in the comment section about who should be leading some of these categories and all that fun stuff, because I know that's how that goes. So you can probably guess by some of the logos as to which names are going to show up on the board, but it's still fun to do anyways. So we'll start things off with the hits category, because that's on the left-hand side here, and it'd be crazy to start off on the right-hand side. So, leading hits right now in the NHL, also the penalty minutes leader in the National Hockey League is Nick Delorier, who currently has 124 hits. So, with Delorier, you're going to get a guy who hits a lot. He's a big, strong player. And I don't think he overly hurts the team defensively, considering the role he plays being, basically an enforcer. But he also is a solid fourth line option as well. And then for Vancouver, a player who's on this list with a lot of hits and certainly is a subject of a lot of trade talk is Luke Schenn, who has 113. I will agree with people who say that Luke Schenn has gotten better as he's gotten older. I think he's a much better player now than he was, but I also think Luke Schenn fits the style of the Canucks very well. He played well with the Canucks the first time around, too. So I do wonder if he's one of those guys that goes somewhere else. Will he excel on a new team? Could he struggle on a new team? And would he end up going from a top four role with the Canucks to maybe being a number seven, as was the case when he ended up with Tampa Bay, and he actually ended up in the minors a bit. But at any rate, Schenn, right now, number two in hits. And then number three, the capital that's on the board is not Tom Wilson, because he hasn't played yet. So that role's gone to Garnet Hathaway, who has 103 hits. And when I was making this up last night, I thought, yeah, we'll stop with the guys who are over 100. And I'm glad, because if I'd gone further, if I'd done more, it wouldn't have all fit on one board. I either would have had to get one of those really big boards that I have, which would be kind of crazy, or I would have had to scrap it. All right, so that's their hits leaders. Your block shots leaders. Well, for Vegas, it has to be Alec Martinez. So with defensemen that block a lot of shots, there's been discussion about whether or not that means that they're out of place, so they have to block that shot. Maybe it's a sign they're not that great defensively. I will disagree. There are times a defenseman will dive to block a shot because they made a mistake, but Martinez, 115 block shots. He is very good at blocking shots. It is part of his game, and he's been one of the best at it for a long time. He's just had problems with injuries, probably in part due to all the shots he's blocked. The flyer that's on this part of the board is Provorov. So when you're coached by John Tortorella, you are expected to block shots, and he's blocked 74 of them so far. For Montreal, Savard has also blocked 74. So it shows that Martinez is way ahead of the competition in that category, and it does show just how strong he is. And this is where you get into the argument about the Norris Trophy. Should a Norris Trophy defenseman be a guy who blocks shots? And if not, what do we do for the guys who do block those shots? I guess we pay them really well in Martinez, Provorov, and Savard's case, but still. Takeaways for Carolina, it has to be Jacob Slavin. Jacob Slavin has 43 takeaways thus far this season, so he's taken the puck away from the other team 43 times, and that to me is also an excellent measure of a really good defenseman. I think hits, blocks, takeaways, these are all things that you can use to find value when it comes to defensemen and players that you can really end up liking quite a bit. But second in takeaways is actually Brandon Hagel. Hagel's game came over from Chicago. He's got 35 takeaways, and Hagel's been one of my favorite players for a few years now, and he's not playing in any different right now than he was in Chicago. Malkin is the guy for Pittsburgh. Malkin, very solid player. Obviously huge, really big player, and 33 takeaways for Malkin. I do sometimes think, and I've said this before, that I think Malkin gets underrated at times. He plays with Crosby. I think there are people who overlook Malkin and just how important he is to the Penguins and just how darn good he is. So if Malkin had been drafted by a different team and played somewhere else, I think he would probably be a bigger star, but he probably wouldn't have those cup rings. So it's a pretty good trade-off. So who leads the league in posts? This is a player that either you can argue doesn't have the fantastic aim, or you can argue this is a player who just has bad luck. And this year, so far, it's been Trocheck who leads the league with 8 posts. I'm not sure how they count this either, though, because there's times where I've seen guys hit multiple posts, and then I look after the game, and I'm like, those didn't count as posts? At any rate, yeah, Trocheck with 8 of them. Now, leading the way in crossbars, this won't surprise anybody. I'm pretty sure that last season, Pedersen was one of the leaders in this category as well. So Pedersen has 3, and so does Ovechkin. So Ovechkin and Pedersen have hit the crossbar 3 times. And yeah, Ovechkin obviously taking shots from everywhere. You're going to hit some crossbars and posts. Same can be said of Pedersen. So whether or not you take a look at crossbars and posts and go, well, it's bad aim or it's just bad luck, up to you guys. So, face-off wins in the NHL. This one is something I've talked about before. First off, you have Horvat, who has 383 face-off wins. Really has become the face-off guy for the Canucks. Like, they will have him come out, take a key face-off, and then leave the ice. So he's become that player, which is great to see. And, of course, from Boston, it has to be Bergeron, right? Who has 362 face-off wins. Horvat does take a lot of face-offs. So it doesn't mean Horvat's better than Bergeron. It just means he takes a lot of face-offs. Although the winning percentage is quite high for Horvat as well. So, yeah, I kind of feel spoiled in this way as a fan of both Vancouver and Boston that, you know, really good centers, really good at faceoffs. And I think Horvat's two-way game is sometimes underrated as well. Your ice time leader in the National Hockey League. Changed page there. And for Colorado, it is clearly Makar with the ice time of 26 minutes and 59 seconds per game. So, if he plays less than 27 minutes in a game, that's a little bit below average because, unless it's 26:59. It's a lot of ice time. And then in LA, you've got Doughty, who still plays an absolute ton. 26:19 for Doughty. And I have seen the posts about, well, you know, Doughty's over the hill and all this. Kings use him a lot. And I really think Doughty's still a pretty effective defenseman. Is he Norris level? No, but I think with the ice time he gets, he does deserve probably a little bit more respect than he sometimes gets. And then for Ottawa, Chabot. Now, Chabot could end up leading this by the end of the year because Ottawa's not shy about using him a lot. So the 26:08 he's put up so far is impressive, and I'm thinking that's only going to go up. Chabot plays a ton for the Ottawa Senators. And again, you can use this when you're going through and figuring out who is really the best defenseman in the league. Notice it's all defensemen that are top in ice time. Makes total sense, of course. That's always the way it's been. There is the occasional forward that'll play more than 20 minutes, but that's rare. It is defensemen that do the lion's share of work out there. And should those defensemen get consideration for Norris? Absolutely. Points per 60 minutes played. So this is one that we've talked about on this channel for years. This can be a measure of two different things. Either a player can be elite offensively or they're being deployed properly. So, your leader in points per 60 minutes played is Tage Thompson, who for every 60 minutes he's on the ice, he scores 3.86 points. So that's elite level. That's fantastic. Thompson has had a remarkable season. Now, that may very well come down as the season goes along, but he's been very good. For Seattle, it's an example of, I think this is where you see, so this is Morgan Geekie, who has 3.84 points per 60 minutes. He's being deployed properly. So if he was playing first line minutes, his points per 60 minutes would likely drop. So that's the tricky area, is finding that perfect sweet spot where a player can produce really well for the minutes they're getting and not overtax them and have that number end up dropping. And then for Calgary, it's another example of this. It's Ruzicka, 3.77, which I expect that to come down as well. But still, Ruzicka is being deployed very well, has fit in quite well with the Flames, and so we'll see if that number stays high or if it drops. I'm guessing it's going to drop. But it's nice to see Ruzicka on the board, right? Penalties drawn. So this is the player that draws, like basically gets the other team to take penalties. For Toronto, you would think it was Matthews, maybe Marner. Those assumptions would be wrong. It's actually Michael Bunting. Yep, 19 times this season. Bunting has drawn a penalty on the other team. And I'm right there with him for Tampa Bay is a guy you might have expected it to be, and that's Kucherov with 19. And this has been a discussion with Matthews. This has been a discussion with McDavid at times when they're not drawing penalties. People will point out when they're being hooked and slashed and all this. And there's definitely something to be said for certain players not getting those calls. And then for Winnipeg, it's actually Dubois, 18. And this is why the other night I said I can understand players embellishing a bit, in that there are players who will just fight through all the checks and the hooks and all that, and, take that cross check, just jump right back up. They may not get that call. So while I understand it looks like poor sportsmanship, and I totally get why people don't like it, I also understand why players would maybe embellish a little bit, because they look at these guys that draw penalties, they look at their numbers and say, all right, well, I guess I can go down a little bit easier when I'm being cross-checked. But yeah, these are the three guys who draw the most penalties. But then there's net penalties. So this takes the penalties you've drawn, subtracts the penalties you've taken to see who's really helping their team when it comes to the net result. The net result for LA is Gabe Vilardi with 12. So Gabe Vilardi is the best in the league in terms of net penalties. He has drawn 12 more than he's taken. And then there's a three-way tie for net penalties, and I didn't feel like just writing the same number over and over again, so I put all three logos together. It is Quinn for Buffalo. It is Eichel for Vegas. That's nice, Vegas and Buffalo right next to each other, right? And then it's Mott for the Ottawa Senators. So, yeah, this is Ottawa Senators right here, and that's 10. So, Jack Quinn, Jack Eichel, and Tyler Mott. So 2 Jacks and a Tyler. The interesting thing is that Jack Quinn, of course, being a rookie, the fact that his net penalties are a positive 10, that's huge. That's huge value that he's giving the Buffalo Sabres, and kudos to him for that. Well done. Nicely done. I was also going to put up penalty minutes. I didn't end up doing that. Delorier has 57. Jack-Eye has 56. Those are your league leaders. I didn't think that was as important a stat as the rest of this, because penalty minutes doesn't always mean, it's not always a positive. All right, now starts with a save percentage above 900, so where they've saved more than 900 out of 1,000 shots, if you're going to project that far out. Toronto, who's at the top, and I had to have a cutoff of a goaltender had to play 10 games in order for me to put them on this board. It's Samsonov. Samsonov, in 90% of his starts, has provided the Toronto Maple Leafs with a save percentage above 900. So that is quality goaltending from Samsonov. And then the number 2 you have for Winnipeg, it's not going to be Riddick. We know that, right? So it is Hellebuck, who has done it 85% of the time. Hellebuck, of course, larger number overall. Hellebuck's number a little bit more impressive than Samsonov's. Not to take anything away from Samsonov, but Hellebuck's played more. And then for Boston, it's not going to be Swayman, who apparently Boston fans want set back to the AHL and blah, 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 blah. Because, hockey fans are really good that way. Yeah, it's Ullmark with 82.4%. I've never understood that when a goaltender has a rough night, people are just like, just send him to the AHL, get rid of him. Really? We're going to just forget the other good games he had? All right, cool. So Ullmark with 82.4% has been very good for Boston and is in the mix when it comes to the Vezina. And it's interesting because both Hellebuck and Ullmark you could consider to be maybe top 3 for that Vezina right now, although that's a whole other argument I don't necessarily want to get into in this video. I can get into that argument in another video, sure, but for now, I'll use that starts above 90% and say, yeah, they've been over 900 in their save percentage often enough. Shots against per 60 minutes. This won't surprise anybody if you've watched a Anaheim Ducks broadcast. They've mentioned it. And I say that because I swear they mention it in every game that John Gibson starts. But it is 37.8 shots against per 60 minutes played by Gibson. It's a lot. With John Gibson, I do wonder how many more years this is going to go on before he says, guys, I'd like to win something. And I know he doesn't want to be traded, and I know that, and I know that his name gets speculated about a lot. But at some point in time, you would think, as his prime years go by, he'll start to think about how well things might be able to go if he was on a team like Colorado, something like that, right? And then for Ottawa, it's Forsberg. Anton Forsberg has been under siege at times. The numbers show it. 35.3 shots against per game, or per 60 minutes for Forsberg. So he's faced a lot of rubber, and this is a problem for Ottawa. If they're really going to turn their record around and they're really going to get better, they have to be better defensively. And then on Arizona, it has to be Vejmelka, right? So Vejmelka, who is getting an even 35 shots a game against, which is a lot. And so those goaltenders deserve a lot of credit for not just saying halfway through a game, you know what? I faced 40 shots already. I'm done. I'm going to go hit the showers. No, I'm done. See you guys later. Out of here. But yeah, there you go. Just some stats I thought were fun to look at. And again, you guys can decide on how many of these are useful and give you information on a player, or whether you think it reveals something negative, which sometimes things can reveal a negative. Again, blocks can be looked at negatively. Posts, crossbars can be looked at that way. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.